Darling screamed.
And as if in answer to a bell, the door opened, and Nana entered, returned from her evening out.
She growled and sprang at the boy, who leapt lightly through the window. Again, Mrs. Darling screamed, this time in distress for him.
For she thought he was killed, and she ran down into the street to look for his little body.
But it was not there, and she looked up.
And in the black night she could see nothing but what she thought was a shooting star.
She returned to the nursery and found Nana with something in her mouth, which proved to be the boy's shadow.
As he leapt at the window, Nana had closed it quickly.
Too late to catch him.
But his shadow had not had time to get out.
Slam went the window and snapped it off.
Nana had no doubt of what was the best thing to do with this shadow.
She hung it out at the window.
Let us put it where he can get it easily, without disturbing the children.
But unfortunately, Mrs. Darling could not leave it hanging out at the window. It looked so like the washing and lowered the whole tone of the house.
She decided to roll the shadow up and put it away carefully in a drawer until a fitting opportunity came for telling her husband.
The opportunity came a week later, on that never-to-be-forgotten Friday.
They sat night after night, recalling that fatal Friday, till every detail of it was stamped on their brains.
If only I had not accepted that invitation to dine at 27.
If only I had not poured my medicine into Nana's bowl.
If only I'd pretended to like the medicine.
My liking for parties, George.
My fatal gift of humour, dearest.
My touchiness about trifles, dear master and mistress.
Then one or more of them would break down altogether.
It's true! It's true! They ought not to have had a dog for a nurse.
Many's the time it was Mr. Darling who put the handkerchief to Nana's eyes.
That fiend!
Mr. Darling would cry, and Nana's bark was the echo of it.
But Mrs. Darling never upbraided Peter. There was something in the right-hand corner of her mouth that wanted her not to call Peter names.
They would sit there in the empty nursery, recalling fondly every smallest detail of that dreadful evening. It had begun so uneventfully, so precisely like 100 other evenings.
With Nana putting out the water for Michael's bath and carrying it to him on her back.
I won't go to bed,
he had shouted, like one who still believed that he had the last word on the subject.
I won't. Nana, it isn't 6 o'clock yet. Oh dear, I shan't love you any more, Nana. I tell you, I won't be bathed. I won't.
Then Mrs. Darling had come in, wearing her white evening gown.
She had dressed early because Wendy so loved to see her in her evening gown.
It was then that I rushed in like a tornado, wasn't it?
Mr. Darling would say, scorning himself. And indeed he had been like a tornado. He came rushing into the nursery with a crumpled little brute of a tie in his hand.
Why, whatever is the matter, father dear?
Matter?
He yelled.
He really yelled.
This tie! It will not tie! I warn you of this, mother, that unless this tie is round my neck, we don't go out to dinner tonight. And if I don't go out to dinner tonight, I never go to the office again. And if I don't go to the office again, you and I starve. And our children will be flung out into the streets.
Even then, Mrs. Darling was placid.
Let me try, dear,
she said. And indeed, that was what he had come to ask her to do. And with her nice cool hands, she tied his tie for him, while the children stood around to see their fate decided.
Some men would have resented her being able to do it so easily, but Mr. Darling had far too fine a nature for that.
He thanked her carelessly.
At once forgot his rage.
And in another moment was dancing round the room with Michael on his back.
How wildly we romped,
said Mrs. Darling now, recalling it.
Our last romp.
Mr. Darling groaned.
Oh, George, do you remember Michael suddenly said to me,
How did you get to know me, Mother?
I remember.
they were rather sweet, don't you think, George?
And there were hours. Now they're gone.
He began to talk again about its being a mistake to have a dog for a nurse.
George, Nana is a treasure.
No doubt, but I have an uneasy feeling at times that she looks upon the children as puppies.
Oh no, dear one. I feel sure she knows they have souls.
I wonder.
Mr. Darling said thoughtfully.
I wonder.
It was an opportunity, his wife felt, for telling him about the boy.
At first he pooh-poohed the story, but he became thoughtful when she showed him the shadow.
It is nobody I know, but it does look like a scoundrel. We were still discussing it. You remember? When Nana came in with Michael's medicine. You'll never carry the bottle in your mouth again, Nana. And it is all my fault.
Strong man though he was, there was no doubt that he had behaved rather foolishly over the medicine.
If he had a weakness, it was for thinking that all his life he had taken medicine boldly.
And so now, when Michael dodged the spoon in Nana's mouth,
He had said reprovingly,
Be a man, Michael.
Won't!
Michael cried naughtily.
Mrs. Darling left the room to get a chocolate for him.
And Mr. Darling thought this showed want of firmness.
Mother, don't pamper him. Michael, when I was your age, I took medicine without a murmur. And I would take it now as an example to you, Michael, if I hadn't lost the bottle.
He had not exactly lost it.
He had climbed in the dead of night to the top of the wardrobe and hidden it there.
What he did not know was that the faithful Liza had found it.
And put it back on his washstand.
I know where it is, Father.
Wendy cried, always glad to be of service.
I'll bring it.
And she was off before he could stop her.
Immediately his spirits sank in the strangest way.
John,
He said, shuddering.
it's most beastly stuff. It's nasty, sticky, sweet kind.
It will soon be over, Father.
John said cheerily.
And then in rushed Wendy with the medicine in a glass.
I have been as quick as I could.
You have been wonderfully quick.
Her father retorted with a vindictive politeness that was quite thrown away upon her.
Michael first.
Father first.
Said Michael, who was of a suspicious nature.
I shall be sick, you know.
Come on, Father.
Hold your tongue, John.
Wendy was quite puzzled.
I thought you took it quite easily, Father.
That is not the point. The point is that there is more in my glass than in Michael's spoon.
His proud heart was nearly bursting.
And it isn't fair. I would say it though it were my last breath. It isn't fair.
Father, I am waiting.
It's all very well to say you are waiting.
Ah.
So am I waiting.
Father's a cowardly custard.
So you are a cowardly custard.
But I'm not frightened.
Neither am I frightened.
Well, then take it.
Well, then you take it.
Wendy had a splendid idea.
Why not both take it at the same time?
Certainly. Are you ready, Michael?
Wendy gave the words 1, 2, 3, and Michael took his medicine.
But Mr. Darling slipped his behind his back.
There was a yell of rage from Michael. And Wendy exclaimed,
Oh, Father!
What do you mean, oh, father? Stop that row, Michael. I meant to take mine, but I missed it.
It was dreadful the way all three were looking at him, just as if they did not admire him.
Look here, all of you,
he said entreatingly, as soon as Nana had gone into the bathroom.
I have just thought of a splendid joke. I shall pour my medicine into Nana's bowl, and she will drink it, thinking it's milk.
It was the colour of milk.
But the children did not have their father's sense of humour, and they looked at him reproachfully as he poured the medicine into Nana's bowl.
What fun,
he said doubtfully, but they did not dare expose him when Mrs. Darling and Nana returned.
Nana, good dog,
he said, patting her.
I've put a little milk into your bowl, Nana.
Nana wagged her tail, ran to the medicine, and began lapping it. Then she gave Mr. Darling such a look, not an angry look. She showed him the great red tear that makes us so sorry for noble dogs, and crept into her kennel.
Mr. Darling was frightfully ashamed of himself, but he would not give in.
In a horrid silence, Mrs. Darling smelt the bowl.
Oh, George, it's your medicine.
It was only a joke,
he roared, while she comforted her boys and Wendy hugged Nana.
Much good. Am I wearing myself to the bone trying to be funny in this house?
And still Wendy hugged Nana.
Oh, that's right. Coddle her. Nobody coddles me. Oh dear, no. I'm the only breadwinner. Why should I be coddled? Why? Why? Why?
The children wept, and Nana ran to him beseechingly, but he waved her back. He felt he was a strong man again.
In vain, in vain. The proper place for you is in the yard, and there you should go to be tied up in this instant.
George, remember what I told you about that boy?
Alas, he would not listen.
When he had tied her up in the backyard, the wretched father went and sat in the passage with his knuckles to his eyes.
In the meantime, Mrs. Darling had put the children to bed in unwonted silence and lit their night lights. They could hear Nana barking, and John whimpered.
It's because he is chaining her up in the yard.
But Wendy was wiser.
That is not Nana's unhappy bark. That is her bark when she smells danger.
Danger?
Danger!
Are you sure, Wendy?
Oh, yes.
Even Michael, already half asleep, asked,
Can anything harm us, Mother, after the night lights are lit?
Nothing, precious. They are the eyes a mother leaves behind to guard her children.
She went from bed to bed, singing enchantments over them, and little Michael flung his arms round her.
Oh, Mother, I'm glad of you.
They were the last words she was to hear from him for a long time.